This week we've got Breakfast Trophy Leader, Larson.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
Extreme thank you to all the Dirtomaniacs that support the show. If you want to get ad-free content and extra free content, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles and support us. Proceeds go to editing the show, upgrading equipment, and helping us travel to events. What it do? Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me this week we have special guest Larson, the Magic Online trophy leader right now for Cephalid Breakfast. So, welcome, man. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on and to talk about my favorite legacy deck.
Hell yeah! I'm new to the deck. New as in like the last 2 months to the deck myself. So this is going to be a treat for me because I'm going to get to really pick your brain. As Eternal Weekend is closing in. But this is a great deck for people who are I won't say new to the format, but are looking for a deck for Eternal Weekend to look at and to either know how to play against or think about playing themselves with a little less than a month left for Eternal Weekend.
Yeah, definitely, it's a powerful deck, and it's going to be out there, and it's going to be powerful. Yeah. So it's a good choice both to play and it's good to know how to play against it.
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. So right now there are basically two kind of schools of breakfast. There's like the Cephalid Breakfast, and then there's the Nadu, I call it the Elvesy Breakfast, which is more, the one is a combo deck that just tries to play Thassa's Oracle and win the game that way. The other is more of a Nadu variant. We kind of went over the Nadu variant with Michael Mapson in a previous episode, probably up here somewhere. But what I want to dig down with you on is specifically the Cephalid Breakfast version, the more combo-y version of the deck, which is I think what you're more well known for.
Yeah, and I'm more experienced with as well. I played a bit with the mid-range version, but not too much, not as much as Mapson.
Yeah. So this is one of those rare Urza Saga decks that is not like an artifact-based deck. This is a deck that plays Urza Saga incidentally just to find Shuko and to maybe do a little bit of maybe you do some beatdown with constructs if that's a secondary plan.
Yeah. So it's absolutely the Saga is very much a tutor in this deck. There are scenarios where you use the tokens, but that's with Nadu now. It's more of a plan CD rather than a plan B. And even back in Stoneforge times, it wasn't super good compared to the artifact deck. We can go to one Saga, turn to Ancient Tomb or something, which this deck cannot do.
Gone are the days of Storyteller staff. Right.
Yeah, but even with I remember playing with Wilds and Baleful Strixes, then the Saga tokens could get really, really big, and that was much better plan then. Now it's 3/3. It's still good meta games, especially against combo. It's still very, very good to have it, but
it does offer some inevitability when and if you get to the Nadu part of the game where you're accidentally putting in 2 or 3 of those during a turn, and you're just okay, well now they're going to be huge, and I have enough mana to activate a bunch of them and make them. But for the most part, we're talking about, Shuko, Core Nomad, and Cephalid Illusionist. Yeah, so one of the great things about this deck also is, you don't have to worry about, you can win without doing damage to your opponent. So you don't have to worry about, they got an Atraxa into play, and if they didn't get the Force of Will, and you can see that when they do Atraxa, you can be well, I'm just going to go for it,
Yeah, and that's super relevant in Legacy as it is today. With both the giant creature from Reanimator like Atraxa and Archon, so often they get in an Archon or something, I discard a card, and then okay, I've wasted a couple of Force Wills and removal spells to try to stabilize the board, but if I top deck a Illusionist or whatever, I just win, and then I do it.
That feels so good when you just draw the card you need, and you're well, I guess I just win the game now. After they jump through all these hoops to make their thing happen, and you're just this game's easy.
And also against other decks like the red, it's quite hard to beat the red Stompy decks in combat.
Yeah.
With the immense pressure they can put on you. But just having the I win button
Yeah.
is super powerful.
Especially since their constructs are generally so much larger than ours too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the things that make this deck work, right? So our creature base is generally 4 Cephalid Illusionists, 4 Core Nomads, some number between 2 and 3 of Narcomoeba, 1 Thassa's Oracle, and then some number between 3 and 4 Nadu, right?
Yeah.
And generally those numbers come down to whether or not you're playing Step Through, and whether or not you're playing Cabal Therapy, right?
Yeah.
So the Cabal Therapy being for the extra creature for the Narcomoebas, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah. 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 If you want to play Cabal Therapy, you need the third Narcomoeba. Without it, you can have it. It's a bit annoying with Shuko sometimes when you only have 2, because then you can't draw 1 unless you also can play creature. But I'd say generally it's worth it to just play 2 if you don't play the therapy.
Yeah, the list I'm playing right now is on 2, and that was like, it was a real logical jump for me to be like, okay, can this deck survive on just 2? And it honestly, like, especially with, if you're in the Core Nomad part, like, even if you draw a Narcomoeba, like, you can just win with just getting 1 trigger out, but you need the 2 if you have Shuko. And sometimes you just draw 1 and you're like, well, I'm gonna go beat down for a little while and like make my opponent have to deal with a 1/1 in the air. Sometimes you have a Shuko 2/1. You can get there with damage. It does happen.
Yeah, and I'd say the like most important part of having it in play these times. Firstly, it's second another Noddy trigger, but also it blocks the frog.
Yes.
And with the Shuko, it blocks the frog and forces them to discard a card, which is very relevant.
Yeah, and that's where some of the other spells come in, like Prismatic Ending or Swords of Plowshares, where this deck is actually, I think, very well positioned in the meta right now, is that you're playing ways to just get frog right off the board. Like, you're not a frog deck, so you need to have an answer to the frog decks, and Swords of Plowshares is like right now at an all-time high as far as value is concerned in the format.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's I'd say the big thing about the deck is what we touched on first, like the ability to combo quickly and cheaply. It's just 3 mana in total, or 4 if you go with Noddy. And the second, it has good interaction, which is also cheap. It has a very good, like, blue counters always have like shitty cards to pitch to Force Will. That's often
Sometimes
where
you have
the
a Narcomoeba in your hand you don't need. Yeah.
But the big downside of it is, firstly, you have to have some bad cards in the deck, which you really don't want to draw, and secondly, it has quite bad mana. That's I'd say the way I usually lose right now is being attacked on the mana.
Yeah.
Either by Wastelands or by Blood Moon or by usually those two, but or sometimes just not drawing the third land or drawing the third land of the wrong color.
Yeah, having that, like, the tension in this deck in the mana base is like knowing that you need a third color, but also knowing that like there are so many Blood Moon decks, so many Wasteland Stifle, like not Stifle decks per se. Stifle's out there again thanks to like Sultai Beans, but like knowing that there are so many ways for opponents to attack your mana that you have to sometimes fetch basics to make sure that you get to play Magic, but also then knowing that like, okay, now I'm like, had I fetched a tropical island or a hedge maze, I could have cast Nadu. Now I just got Nadu like sitting in my hand. Now it's Force of Will fodder, and that can be one of the tougher parts of this deck is navigating the mana base properly.
Yeah, and that's actually the if we talk about playing this deck, the thing you need to always have in mind is what is your plan? When you look at your starting hand, what will I do with this? And that's like planning out how will you develop your combo, how will you develop your interaction, like if you have a Force Will, what kind of things do I want to Force Will, what do I want to remove, like do I want to use my removal on their Nethergorth, or do I want to save it on their turn to Frog, or do I have a Daze or whatever for their turn to frog. And for the mana base as well, it requires a lot of planning. Like, do I want to go for the turn 1 Saga to just get the Shuko as quick as possible? Or do I want to like develop my mana bit? Do I want to develop the basic? Do I want to go for the Shuko into Cavern of Souls on Wizard Nadu plan?
Yeah.
So that's the I think both big draw and big power of playing the deck is like building those plans around what your opponents are doing, or like sometimes you don't even need to consider what your opponents are doing, just to go for your turn 2. But
Just
that's
slam
what,
it, yeah.
yeah. But that's what I think is really fun about the deck, and what makes you win more with it is like building those, developing a plan for the game.
Yeah. One of the things that I've kind of noticed about this deck, my experience, your experience on Magic Online is probably much more prolific than mine. I in the last month though, I've put up, I think, like 72 games on Magic Online, which is a lot for me. It's I keep saying this, it's like 600 more % than practice that I got in for last Eternal Weekend in that time period. So like I played I played in like 2 monthlies before I went to Eternal Weekend last year. But one of the things I'm noticing is pilot style, right? That is something in the first 50 games that I played, my pilot style was jam it. Just go for it. Just try and see if this is a deck that I can just be as sloppy as possible and just win when my opponent's shields are down. And I did that mostly to see what my opponent's answers would be, so that I knew in the second 50 that I'm running, where I'm trying to be more conservative, trying to play around things that people can get you on. Pilot style is a big part of this deck, is determining one, knowing what you're up against, but also being able to say like, oh, this is my style, I'm gonna go all in on the combo and try and make it happen. Or be like, okay, if I wait like a turn or two, I'm not losing immediately, and I try and play Nadu protected instead of Cephalid Illusionist, and can I make that the better plan here? And a lot of times I find that being a more conservative player, now knowing when to take those leaps and just jam, of course, but being a more conservative player has definitely helped me up my win percentage over the last month with this deck.
Yeah, but I think what you did, like starting out with just jamming, to like, especially if you haven't played much Legacy in a while and don't know exactly what to expect from different decks, it's a very, very good like strategy to start learning this deck.
Yeah.
And how it interacts with what your opponent, how your opponents interact with you, I should say.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about this deck too, is that like then you learn the power, the like raw power of Memory's Journey.
Yeah.
Because that card, like anyone looking at this deck sees Memory's Journey, and every Magic player looks at a deck and the first thing they go is like, what's wrong with these cards? Like they look at the card that they think like, I could cut this for my pet card, right? And Memory's Journey was the card that I looked at and was like, why is this in the deck? Like, do we really have a problem with like that particular issue that Memory's Journey is solving? And the answer is, Memory's Journey is a powerhouse. There are so many times when you are about to win the game, you've got Dread Return on the stack, you have your untapped Tropical Island, right? And your opponent's like, oh, well, you might have Force back up, you might have Daze, you might have Teferi Time Raveler out, right? But they have what's called Fairy Macabre, and there's nothing you can do about it aside from pay that 1 green, Memory's Journey, put Cavern and Thassa's Oracle back on top, or in a pinch maybe Lotus Petal, Thassa's Oracle, and Cavern if you're like down on mana or you're afraid they're going to do something. But then you can just win the game in like the next turn or two, as long as you're not going to lose immediately. Like, Memory's Journey saves you so much. And I think the funny thing is like in my head, as a player of this deck, there are points where Fairy Macabre could be better used by the opponent, but they don't know the deck, right? They don't know if you're running 2 Narcomoebas or not, right? They don't know if should I get the Memory Journey and the Narcomoeba while it's on the stack right now, and then I have a way to stop the Thassa's Oracle? So I think it's funny, like, I don't want to give away too much because I'm playing this deck at Turtle Weekend, but I think that people underestimate how good Memory's Journey is, and then just like auto lose to it when they go for what is essentially the like you should always brainstorm at the end of your turn play by being like, I'm gonna hit the card you're getting and some other card, right? Like it's like you should. I feel like you probably shouldn't wait till the Dread Return is on the stack to try and get rid of the Thassa's Oracle. Especially with those like triggers on the stack for when you're playing Magic Online. Sometimes I click the button too many times, and I'm just like, okay, here you go. I'm just waiting for this to go down, and my opponent just like waits till I cast Dread Return. I'm like, that's wrong, you know?
Yeah, especially when you go off your Shuko, so they actually like can
Oh
do
yeah,
it. But I think at least online, more and more people are catching up on how to play against it. Because when I first started playing Memory's Journey, and I was not the first, other people started playing it way before me. It was like, oh, with Painter grinds on you, and then like, okay, upkeep Memory's Journey back.
yeah.
Oracle, that doesn't happen anymore. Now they always have
No,
the.
they know. Yeah, they know better.
Yeah, but
Yeah. So I want to talk. You mentioned Daze, and Daze is like a relatively new, uh, not new, but like it's there's a resurgence in Daze in this deck. There was a while where no one was playing Daze, and what was great about that is that no one was playing around Daze for us too. So when we switched to Daze, Daze got very good for us because people were just like jamming directly into your Dazes. And we had to do things like you had to cut like a Swords to Plowshares here, a Narcomoeba there. Figure out ways to I think I was playing 2 prismatic endings, so there's 3 Dazes for you right there. Like we had to make these little like slivers. Maybe take out a Teferi Time Raveler to figure out where like where we want to put those Dazes. But I think Daze is solidly back in the deck now, and that's something that again, like I don't want to give away too much. I want to play this deck at the weekend. But if you're playing against me, expect Daze, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean the Daze is super powerful for this deck. It's a bit sometimes it's a bit awkward since you're trying to resolve the 3 drops.
Yeah.
But even then, like protecting a turn 2 combo for 1 card, super. As I said, Blood Moon can be a huge problem. Trying to solve that can be you against red deck. It's a bit annoying though since they have the Spirit Guide, but it's still very very powerful. And right now there's so many decks that try to resolve expensive spells. You have the One Ring from a bunch of decks. Show and Tell is kind of back with Vexing Bobble.
Vexing Bobble is a card that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Vexing Bobble is very tough for us to deal with, specifically because Dread Return does not cost mana.
No.
So how do we beat a Vexing Bobble?
Yeah, but then we're back to firstly to the Memory's Journey. Thanks to Memory's Journey, you can combo through the Vexing Bauble. Only it takes another turn since you need to put back the Oracle on top.
Yeah.
And I can also mention with Memory's Journey, if you play this deck, an important thing is to sack your Illusionist to a Dread Return before you Memory's Journey.
Yeah.
So they don't they can't target it and make you mill.
Yeah, that's the like number one thing I've learned is like they will always have a card to target your Illusionist. You've got to get rid of it.
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the Dread Return is in your hand or something, and you need to like pause the turn and hope they don't have it.
Yeah.
But if you can, try to get rid of it some way. Like if they attack you and you can block with it, because that is a risk. But back to Vexing Bauble. So yeah, with Memory's Journey you can like win it if you combo, but the decks playing Vexing Bauble usually play to resolve their own stuff. So if you have multiple counters, you need to plan like, do I use my Force of Will on this, or do I like brainstorm back my Force of Will and try to interact with them in other ways, with Plows or Teferi or whatever, or just combo. Thirdly, I've actually gone from having 4 Swords to Plowshares to 2 Swords to Plowshares and 2 endings in my main deck, only because of Vexing Bauble, to have a way of removing it early. Of course, ending does a lot of more things. It removes creatures like Frog and Tameo. But it's because of that card I made that change, because I had very hard time of beating the Vexing Bobble into Blood Moon or Vexing Bobble into One Ring decks, since you can't interact by wasting them. You can't interact by having damage, but you have the quick combo. But yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting is, and this is going to be kind of a hot take here, is the deck is actually much better positioned because Reanimator is such a strong deck that I think that opponents have to use sort of a suboptimal plan against us, because like the optimal plan would be Grafdigger's Cage, right? Grafdigger's Cage stops the combo cold. We can't really flashback Memory's Journey to like get things going. So because Grafdigger's Cage is at all-time low because of the speed of that card, and because there's really not a deck that wants to play that over Fairy Macabre, we're in a position where it seems like it's tough because everyone's focused on the graveyard right now, but we have a plan that those decks can't really react to.
Yeah, and I'd say that is a big part of it. But also, secondly, that there's so few red blasts around. Like the only deck that plays it is the mono red decks, basically.
Yeah.
And red blast is one of the best cards against our deck, since it answers both the illusionist and the Nadu, as well as the Teferi on the stack for just 1 mana.
Yeah, it seems like, like I think we saw like one Grixis Control list that did well in GP Vegas at MagicCon Vegas, but overall, like Volcanic Islands are at an all-time low right now, which is that's why Red Blast is not really being played that much. You don't have those blue-red Delver decks, jamming like 3 or 4 of them into the sideboard. You only have to deal with the decks that you 100% know have them. The Red Prison decks. You just aren't seeing, you aren't seeing Dragon's Rage Channelers at the rate that they used to be played. And I think a lot of that is due to Psychic Frog. So in this time right now, where we're not seeing that, it is useful to take advantage of the fact that that you're not going to see Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, at least from most of the decks that are being played.
Yeah, definitely. And I also like your matchup against both Reanimator and Blueback Tempo is quite right with this deck if you know how to play it. So if you're playing this deck in Eternal Wheatland, practice against those 2 decks, because they will definitely show up.
I feel like over the course of the last month, getting that practice in, I've gotten a lot better about knowing like what actually matters in that matchup. Knowing when to like let a frog go because like next turn I'm gonna have the combo, or being like, like I can take a hit here, or even like baiting your opponent into dropping cards to their frog and then swordsing it, which is like, oh, that is chef's kiss. When you can get like 4 or 5 cards, it's so amazing. You're like, yeah, I guess I'll block with this construct, and they're like, yeah, I'll pump it 3 times. And you're like, and swords, that always feels amazing. But those are, it's rare that you get to do that, but at the same time, knowing that like that's an option is like a big part of playing this deck, and any deck with Swords to Plowshares, honestly. So let's talk about sideboarding options here. Some of the most popular decks, obviously Reanimator. We have our own Fairy Macabres. We have Ghost Vacuum. Some people are also playing Soul Lantern Guide. So that's like 4 cards right out of the gate that you can decide on how useful they are. What's your plan when you go up against a Reanimator list?
I usually take in always all the Grave Hit. It's 4 pieces, and every Reanimator opponent will leave in some number of Reanimates. And not necessarily the whole plan, but like usually at least the 4 Reanimates plus the Miracle Reanimate guy. I don't remember the name of that card.
Metamorphosis Fanatic.
Yeah. But then, and I also take in all the extra removal spells from the sideboard to deal with frogs or reanimated trolls or whatever. But the thing to keep an eye out for is like how your opponent is playing the match. Are they keeping in? If you win the game 1 and then in game 2 they still have Entombs and still full on grave combo, then you like not so happy to board out forces
Yeah.
counters. Like no matter what, you will want your grave hate, but the rest of the interaction you need to like look at how your opponent is playing.
Yeah,
If
it
they
feels
have
like they're not like fully on the like throw every creature in from the sideboard in against you. They're like still pretty happy to like put an Atraxa into play.
yeah. I mean, most people I meet like keep at least 2 entombs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm usually a bit scared still against like big reanimation. But I've also met like say a third of the people I meet board out the all entombs and like take in Barrogoyfs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what you need to keep an eye out for in that matchup in the late game or mid game and even early game is the Harbinger of the Sea.
Yeah.
Which can wreck you if you don't anticipate it.
Especially if you don't have like a white open for like a swords or like a prismatic ending's not going to help you. Obviously, no. You need to have a way to either get rid of that thing or to make sure you're countering it.
Yeah. So it's usually good to like get the planes early in that matchup just for that reason.
Yeah.
And that's a card from the blue black mid range deck as well, or temper deck, which can really wreck you if you're not.
One of the issues I have with playing this deck is like, man, if we could just find room for like a couple of Lord and Revealeds so that like we can get, because they have Troll, they'll just go fetch a regular swamp, right? Or get their underground sea, and now they have islands, so it doesn't matter for them, right? But with us, we don't have that like colorless way to get out of a Blood Moon or a Harbinger of the Seas, or back to basics, if you will. And it's like, man, there's just, this deck is so tight. There's just like not a lot of wiggle room to like just be like, oh yeah, 4 slots, I'll just take these 4 cards out. It's very tough to find like a spot to like be like, yeah, I want to put a Lord Revealed in here. And the deck desperately wants one, but I don't think you can afford it slot wise.
No, that's what makes Troll so good in their deck, because the Troll does something,
yeah,
both
it's part of the plan.
Getting lead and getting the grave, creature in the graveyard, and that's why like Lord Reveal is so good in like Vintage, where you can hardcast it somewhat easily. Yeah. So for the Reanimator matchup, I'd say the most important thing is like thinking, how will I interact with what they're doing, and how will I like, because the paths of interaction are like, 1, force them to have counted for your stuff, removal. 2, have removal for their creatures, like their frogs and harbingers and Tamio, if they play that. And 3, stopping them from reanimating something. So you need to like balance, or at least plan with what you have in terms of your combo, your removal, and your grave hit. And I guess your own counters can go into counter spells can go into all 3, whether you want to force through your stuff or want to stop theirs. And that's why the cantrips is quite important in that matchup, and you should not load them too early just because you need to find out what you will have to interact against.
All right. So let's talk about the Red Prison decks. The Blood Moon or Grindstone decks kind of fall into the same category of like, they're gonna deal with you in pretty much the same way in games 2 and 3, I think.
Yeah. So the most important card to keep in mind, to keep an eye out for in this matchup, is Blood Moon. You don't want to lose to it. So you need to, whenever you have an opener, like, how do this interact against the Blood Moon? Do I have the counter for it? Do I have the basics I need? And sometimes it can be a bit awkward to fetch both basics. So you can, like, if you have an island in hand and then a Misty Rainforest, and you have the Nomads and the Illusionist, then it's probably right to start off playing the Nomads with a Tundra,
yeah.
And then keep the island. Like, you need to just plan out, how will I interact with the Blood Moon? because they're very likely to have either a Blood Moon or a Magus.
I think also one of the really important things to think about is, turn 1 Blood Moon, terrible. Obviously, no one wants that to happen. But you have to think about it into after turn 2 as well. And one of the things that I think is really important, in a spot that I've messed up on a few times, is like playing the correct fetch land to know that, like, okay, like I have a Misty, I have a Flooded Strand in my hand, and I know that, like, I can dig to a plains if I have to, but if I start with a Flooded Strand, I have to go get the plains, and then I'm off of blue for the rest of the game if they slam a Blood Moon. So in my head, like, it makes more sense to play the Misty Rainforest, and then if they get a Blood Moon and you can't stop the Blood Moon, at least you can get an island and you can still play Magic against them. And even, you don't need white mana to win the game. Shuko doesn't cost colored mana. So there is a possibility that you'll draw into a Shuko, and at least you can still play, the Illusionist and the larger half of your deck. Like, I mean, I think, it's just Swords to Plowshares, right? Like, a Teferi. So, whereas Teferi is important, it'll help bounce that up. I think that the main thing here is you want to be prioritizing being able to continue to play Magic against your opponent. So in that scenario, the Misty Rainforest starting and then passing, okay, I got to get an island. And then the next turn, you have the option to be like, okay, now I'll go get a plains if they didn't play the Blood Moon,
Yeah. So you need to plan out for that. You need to keep Blood Moon in mind, and to some degree Bobble as well. But they usually play it out turn 1 if they have it. So, but their interaction against us is also important to keep in mind, because it's gotten much better now than when they don't play Chalice. Although Chalice was very good, but they are a Pyroblast deck now.
Yeah.
So you really want to, if you have the opportunity to find a Cavern of Souls for example, Nadu, that's great. It's often right to play out the Nomads before you play the Nadu, or before you play the Illusionist, so you can combo in response to a Pyroblast.
Yeah.
So those things are important to keep in mind.
So let's look at. I want to real quick look at a couple other decks that I've been seeing a lot of, and get a quick. How do you think things should go against these decks? Let's see what I've been playing a lot of recently. I've been keeping good track of all the decks that I'm playing.
I just mentioned before, the Painter is a Blood Moon deck now. They play Blood Moon after the sideboard, so keep that in mind.
Here's another very similar style, I think, of what you need to watch out for is the Eldrazi deck.
Yeah, I feel that is much better matchup, because their interaction against us is much worse.
Yes.
I mean, they have Chalice, which is beatable, and all Eldrazi players doesn't even play Chalice. Some of them play Vexing Baubles, and their Vexing Baubles are much worse. And then it's the Kozilek's Command, which is quite expensive for them to play mana-wise.
Yeah, if they're holding mana up for that, you're generally in a pretty good position, because, one, your counterspells are like, Daze is like super live for that a lot of times. But beyond that, they're not progressing their board, which is wonderful. If they're not playing the Mica Spawn, sowing Mica Spawn against you and like double wasting you, you're generally doing okay in that matchup. It just comes down to kind of prioritize the combo, I would say, and try and make sure that you're playing around like whatever incidental hate that they have.
Yeah, that's definitely a matchup where you should really be fast, as fast as you can. They usually play Fairy Macabre, so keep that in mind. Sometimes they have a Leyline of the Void, or usually either Leyline or a Fairy Macabre. Then Dismembers off the board as well. But their interaction is quite bad against you. So it's a deck you really want to be fast, and if you're reasonably fast, you usually win.
Yeah. All right, and then there's two other kinds of decks I want to talk about. One is Doomsday, Because that, I think, is a deck that had been slowly declining for a while, but now that they figured out this tempo version with Frog, we're seeing a lot of that. And one, it's important to just kind of know, like, what you're like. Are you playing against the Doomsday version, or are you playing against like a tempo deck, right? But then, what do you do against a deck where you've like lost game one? You're like, okay, it's Doomsday. They Doomsdayed me. They're on sort of the same plan we are as far as just trying to get Thassa's Oracle into play.
Yeah. But the tough part against with sideboarding against that deck is how creature heavy will they be, and how Doomsday heavy will they be. They will always keep the Doomsday in against us. It's not like, I know against the tempo decks they usually board it out, but against the Breakfast they don't. At least I've never seen that. But I usually like perhaps keep 2 removal spells in or something. I'm not a big fan of the what's it called, the replicate counter spell.
Oh, Consigned to Memory.
Yeah. I don't think that's super good against them because they usually build piles to beat it.
Yeah. That's the one thing Doomsday is resilient. They can find ways against the common ways to hate out their deck. So I think they've all kind of figured out that like Consigned to Memory is a card people bring in, and they have a plan against that now.
Yeah. I mean, the times I've gotten them after Doomsday Resolved, it's like I did it. I have my own combo, and sometimes I've gotten them with Omen's Chance, so they can't use their turn, and with a Memory's Journey on them. That's another thing. It's grave hit as well. You can force them to shuffle their deck and shuffle in cards from their graveyard.
Yeah. That's oh man. There's been times where I had it in my hand, and like you watch them, you play, you know they get the Thassa's Oracle in play, and you're like, I'll hard cast this with the green open, and they're like, counter it, and you're like, okay, I'll pay the green. And then it's like having two pieces of hate against them. So that's a situation where, like, if you can get Memory Journey in hand and just have it open, a lot of times that card all by itself can just win you the game. Now they have access to Thoughtseize and stuff like that, but I feel like that Memory Journey is actually an all-star in this particular matchup if you can find it.
Yeah, it's really good against the Resolve Doomsday. But I'd say the general plan against in the matchup is like try to get your combo going. Like get out the first piece quickly, so that you can win with like a second piece only. Like so, if try to play out the turn 1 Nomads or Shuka if you have it, to make them play scared.
Orum's Chant also great here sometimes, where you can just be like, yeah, now you can't actually cast anything, and then they're like, I have 0 cards in my deck.
Yeah, it's great, and it's generally super great against all Dark Ritual decks. Because you can respond with the Dark Ritual when they actually try to go for the Doomsday. If they've like spent a lot of resources before, they might go petal Dark Ritual. Then you can, save your days for the Doomsday later. If you shunt them. But I'd say in general, try to stop the Doomsday. Like, don't try to beat them after it resolves. That rarely goes well.
Yeah, they again, like they just. I feel like every Doomsday player has a plan for whatever the most common hate is. So they're gonna build a pile that generally can beat something like a Consigned to Memory or something like that, or at the very least they're gonna have something in their hand. A Thoughtseize or something that they can just take the card out of your hand with. So it almost is always better to just be like, no, I just don't want you to do that. It's a real gambit to be like, yeah, I'll just let you resolve Doomsday and then like see if I can beat your answers. And I feel like they can just tell too. Like when you're like, yeah, that resolves. You're like, oh, this guy has something in his hand.
Yeah, but even so, like you never like let them resolve Doomsday if you have the counter. But keeping up 2 mana for a consign is usually much worse than trying to go for your combo when they have Doomsday.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to get them with the consign. They plan it.
All right, so final deck I want to talk about is this Mystic Forge, like this mono blue like Mystic Forge deck that like runs what is it, Glaring Fleshraker, and like just does the combo from there, and like 1 rings.
Yeah, a bunch of untap artifact things.
Yeah. So how do we
Keys,
deal
what
with
do you call
that
it?
deck?
It's a bit like the mono red deck. You want to be fast, and the difference here that isn't the difference here is that the red deck plays Blood Moon, which kind of locks you out, and this deck plays Karn or the One Ring, which just wins them the game. It's like the same in its. They play a card which just wins them the game. Both decks, but yeah, the deal is the same. You need to have a plan for consign, be it that you ending it or counter it and counter the next thing. Here is a matchup where Daze is great. Like you force their Vexing Bobble and then you Daze their ring.
I find also a lot of times that this is one of the matchups where going for the construct plan is often great because they're already doing so much damage to themselves with Ancient Tomb. You can just be like, oh, you're at 10? Okay, well, I'll just start attacking. You know, like sometimes a Narcomoeba will get into just enough damage to get you there. And of course, like when they play Ring and that stops you for a turn, that's rough. You want to be able to counter that. But there are a lot of times where that deck kind of just runs out of gas at like 5 life, and you're like, okay, well, like I'm just going to start going for it. I feel like the getting to attack them in this particular scenario is actually one of the easier ways to take this deck down.
And another thing against this deck, which you kind of need to keep in mind, is when to counter their Grim Monoliths.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you actually want to do that, and they want to hide that fact from you. So there are some obvious examples. If they go like turn 1 land, Lotus Petal, Grim Monolith, then it's usually a good idea to counter that. Because they will usually like follow up with untap thing and then a big play. Perhaps an untap thing, Needle, Vexing Bobble, a big play.
Yeah.
Which like locks out your Force Will.
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is another deck that plays Vexing Bobble, and that can be particularly hard for you to deal with.
But you kind of need to read their hand, like think about what can they do, what will they do, when is it right to counter watch. I mean, some things you always counter One Ring if you can, but like cards like Vexing Bobble, when you counter it, when do you try to remove it?
Cool.
So on.
Well, Larson, are you going to Eternal Weekend Europe?
I think so, yeah. I will probably book later this weekend.
I almost decided to go. I was like, if our Patreons like go nuts this month, like I'll book the trip. But it was gonna be like me, Phil, and then I couldn't go without my wife. And we had this like whole plan.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, like if we just really tighten the belt on like going out and stuff, we can do it. But
yeah, you kind of want to do that as well if you're in Prague. It's part of the fun of being there, but at least you're going to the one in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, definitely
When
going
is
to
it?
Pittsburgh. That is the 21st. Yeah, sorry,
soon.
the 22nd. I want to say the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of November. I believe I'd have to look at my work schedule to know exactly what I have off. But yeah, it's the week before Thanksgiving, which is that's its own travel holiday. But yeah, I feel like this is almost invariably the deck that I'm going to go with for Eternal Weekend. So if you're listening to this and you sit down next to me at the event, you're gonna know. But I feel like this is one of those decks where, especially like as a known entity, visually speaking, people are just gonna know what you're on one way or the other, and you just have to try your very hardest to play the deck as well as you can. But this is a deck that I feel like gives you a lot of room to juke, a lot of room to play like with skill, and I don't know, man. Like this feels this is the most powerful I've felt in this format for like 3 years. The last time I felt this good was when 8-Cast was like a tier 1 deck.
That's cool to hear. Well, good luck in Eternal Weekend. Hopefully it goes well for you.
Yeah, right back at you.
Yeah. Yeah. I just mentioned also that, like, one thing which is important with this deck is that the creatures actually have text. The text on the illusion is that it kind of can prevent the damage. It's very relevant now. It can create auto triggers. It can block frog forever with an Archimeba. So if
you can block frog, you can block Traxa. Yeah, the frog, the having an Archimeba and an illusionist in play is actually kind of great.
And then, like, infinite blocking with nomads, like redirecting damage and then preventing the damage. It's important skill when playing this deck, like just redirecting damage with nomads in combat in response to like Fury or something.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I always tell people, think like you're drafting. Like when you're playing this deck, like sometimes these cards that just seem like it's just a 1/1 that like has text win the game, and it does have other text on it, and so you can, you have to think about combat math and stuff like that. I've seen a lot of people, like do things where they attack all in, and you're like, I have like 4 damage like on the board, like I can block one of these things and swing back in. You're at 2 life. What are you thinking? There's a lot of like, I think a lot of times legacy players kind of forget the basics of Magic the Gathering, because they're in that headspace of like, okay, I got the combo, I've got to worry about this getting reanimated, this whole thing, and then they go down to like 3 life, and you're like, a perfect example is like if an opponent has, if you have a Cephalid Illusionist, right, and on your turn, you block it with the Narcomoeba, they don't gain that life, right? Because the damage is prevented. And so on the next turn, if you have like 3 creatures and they're at 1 life, you swing in with two of those creatures and have the Illusionist, you can again prevent the damage from the block and get in that 1 extra damage you need, It's a very relevant piece of information because some people will just give up if they don't combo. And this deck has so much more going on than just the combo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I said, like one important thing is like making a plan, executing it, and sometimes the plan fails. Then you're left with a couple of random creatures, some saga tokens, whatever. And Nadu is a big hitter for a turn. It's that's rarely left. It's usually countered, but I mean, creature combat, it happens quite often with this deck.
Yeah. All right, well, Larson, it's been a blast having you, man. I really appreciate the insights, and this felt like I got like a coaching session from you today. Is great. A little coaching, a little therapy. It was great. It was great. Again, do you have anywhere that you want people to find you? Do you have a Twitch channel or anything like that we can?
No, I don't have a Twitch channel. I have a YouTube channel with one video from May.
I'll link that below for sure. And of course, you're pretty active in the Cephalid Breakfast Discord channel as well.
So, that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Yeah,
if
people
you have some
can find you there.
Cephalid related question.
Yeah, the Cephalid Line Cooks, I believe it's called. I'll link that. I'll link that below. But again, it was a blast having you on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a blast being on. Thank you for having me. Thank you for making such a awesome podcast.
Oh, appreciate it, man. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We will catch you next time. If you get a chance, hit all the buttons, do all the things, follow us on all the things. And if you like this content, don't forget to hit us up on patreon.com/eternalturtles. Thanks so much for watching. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribe to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurtles. Thanks so much for watching.